Well, thanks everybody for coming out. Oh, good, Larry. Um, yeah, Robin had asked if I'd been playing around with pewter casting, if maybe I'd do a brown bag demo for it. And I've had a lot of fun really just kind of experimenting with a process that I don't know, may feel intimidating initially, but really it's pretty straightforward. The material turns very well. I would say comparable to a lot of the resin casting. Less, I know this looks ridiculous, but less equipment, less investment. Uh, the other funny part is I liked it because it adds like heft to your projects, and then you get into wood turning, and it's how do you make it as light and airy and as possible. So maybe that's a little counterintuitive, but uh, and we got into it through really watching the Lee Carter demo video from the Rocky Mountain Club, and I had some experience in sand casting, also at CSU, but not connected to Lee, and so was a little bit familiar. But this is on a much smaller scale. So, and then actually a lot. I wrote all your names down of who I saw in those demos. So if I mess up, I know that Bob, Raleigh, Dale, Larry, everybody was there, and they can fill in where I mess up. But and then the other thing is growing up. So my parents had lived in Southeast Asia, and they had picked up a lot of Royal Selangor pewter. It's a company that makes pewter stuff. And so growing up, I brought a coaster. These are things that I remember from early in my childhood of a couple things that were pewter that I really liked. And so then it kind of connected with being able to incorporate that into some of the turning and some of the kind of artsy things. Uh, I was looking. Oh, that's okay. I had a joke ready to go for Don. Oh, you're there. You're there. Well, I was thinking of all these jokes, but they sounded too tinny, so I'm not gonna do it. Which we'll get there. We'll get there with the composition of the material. So, uh, if we can switch to PowerPoint. Yep, and I will play this. I only have 400 slides, and so yeah, we'll finish tomorrow. Uh, but just wanted to give a kind of a brief overview. Really, I brought a bunch of different projects that I did, a bunch of molds, a bunch of things that I've kind of collected, uh, and then really kind of run through the process, and then run through some of the molding. We'll melt and cast some blanks, and then get over and turn a little bit. There won't be a finished project, but at least get a taste of what it looks like to run through the whole thing. So examples that we have, these are maybe more traditional. A lot of drinkware historically was pewter. Now a lot of Etsy jewelry is, different boxes and goblets and those sorts of things. There's actually just like so in England, just like there's the worshipful company of turners, there's then also the worshipful company of pewterers, and so they produce a lot of kind of a lot of work and have actually been advancing some technology within pewter, which is kind of astounding, mainly in kind of chemicals and things. But if you look at those YouTube videos, they have like 10 views, so they're very obscure. And then in wood turning, I think this is the most common example. So a variety of different bowls, putting rims on bowls, putting bases on bowls, and we'll get into. You can either kind of cast those in place or add those in as secondary pieces and finish out bowls. Goblets, same thing. Rims. And then throw this in for the box. Where did Raleigh go? The box makers. But incorporating it. So really, this is to me kind of an embellishment. I haven't tried to make right like a full project out of pewter, so it's just incorporating metal as a decorative element within a project. Uh, and then some other yes, and then some other things. So Stuart Mortimer is a guy out of England, and He's in the company of Turners, and he does a lot of spiral work, but then incorporated some decorative pewter elements. And then I threw this in not so much as an advertisement. The goal is that I'm not advertising necessarily for anything, but I put prices of a bunch of stuff in here. But then Jimmy Clues does I think a fair amount with pewter, and then has his classes available. But really, it looks very similar in my view of what you'd be able to fairly easily just replicate at home. So what is the material? And this isn't a science lesson, but I'll just kind of breeze through this. But it's an alloy of tin and antimony, and then some other stuff can be added. Historically, lead was included, so it was a tin lead alloy. And then, like a lot of solders are still, they're not lead free, have lead. So you just want to watch out if you're buying secondhand pewter. And trying to melt that down, that there could be lead in some of that old pewter. You could use a lead test strip. To me, it's not worth the hassle, so I just buy it as a lead-free version. And that you'll often see is Britannia is a version, but it's easy to see that everything, for the most part now, unless you're specifically looking for lead, will be lead-free. And the advantage is it's a low melt temp, so you could melt this on your kitchen stove, 400 to 500 degrees. I use a torch, which is pretty straightforward. And then I just work off of ingots. So I have a couple examples. Maybe we can start passing stuff.
Sure.
And so I put a couple sources there. Amazon is like $32 a pound. And then Roto Metal is another place that actually I found like a brochure when I got the pewter stuff from Gene, that's where he had ordered it from. And so I went there, and that actually has been a great source. So the flatter bar, or the skinnier bar, that's from Roto Metals, and it was $25 a pound. Sure. Yeah, sure.
Pass the period pieces around.
Yeah. Be welcome to pass anything or come up and grab and look at anything. This is just a comparison because I've messed this up a number of times, and I have examples of some things I screwed up on a box that I was making. Pewter is very dense, but very weak. So the charts, all it really is comparing to is other materials that we may look at: steel, M2 steel, aluminum, copper, brass. So it's heavy, but its melting temperature is so low, even compared to like aluminum, which you may think is a low melting temp. It's 500 degrees underneath that. And then in terms of strength, you look at M2. So a lot of our even like lower end high speed steel is still insane compared to all the other materials for its strength properties. That's hardened. So pewter doesn't even like appear on the chart. So I took that one out, and you can see pewter compared to steel or copper or really anything, it's very weak. So if you drop a part on the concrete floor, it'll bend, it'll dent, it'll mar. It is very unforgiving. And so I treat it like I would, like I wouldn't want to drop a wooden project on the floor. Same thing, like you're gonna mess up your project. So I got done with a finial. It was beautiful, everything was great, and I was giving it a final shine. I dropped it on the floor, and it bent the tip over, and I had a temper tantrum, and then I started over again, and I got done. I actually brought maybe both of those, and I got done with the next one. It was beautiful, everything was great, and then it was pitted. So I started all back over, and in the end, got one that I liked. But there's also no real penalty to it because you can remelt it over and over and over again.
I like that chart. There, very technical. But
So here's the thing. I'm an engineer.
No.
I could not fit in like a couple technical things, but I tried to make it not real crazy, not spend a lot of time, but there's some other technical details sprinkled throughout. So then the overview of the process, pretty straightforward. And I included a bunch of tips just of things that I've found as I've gone through. Uh, is the material prep, so it comes in an ingot, cut it down so it fits in however you're going to melt it. Prepping a mold, going through if you're going to duplicate something, like this was for these tops, make the wooden object and then you're able to duplicate that, or buy something from Hobby Lobby that you want to make an impression of. Then you have your mold prep, your melting, which is pretty easy, demolding and turning. So no, right? Like there's no crazy steps in this process. The hardest thing to me is what comes out of the mold is not done. It's usually rough surface, you need to clean it up. And so the difficult part is how do I get from what I have cast as a blank into the final project. And so you can come and look at these later, but I wanted to do a ring, but make the ring core itself instead of buy a ring core. And it required a variety of steps, and I have each of the 4 steps. And so that's really the trickiest, most complicated part. I can make the ring, it's no big deal, but then I jam chuck it one way, clean up a couple faces, turn it around, jam chuck it another way, clean up a couple faces, then do the inside on a different jam chuck on one side, then flip it, and so it just becomes this multiple step process. That's not hard, but how do you get from really a ring that isn't anything into your final project can be tricky. But
Like you're collecting the shaving on that one?
yes.
Is that right? So you can reuse those after you.
Yeah, so I try to collect as much as I can. Even if it's contaminated, it'll burn off. I won't melt these probably today because it can be a little smoky, but I try to collect as much as I can. Either works. So you can do a bevel riding cut with a normal, let's say, spindle gouge, taking light passes, or scraping ends up being, I would say, a little more optimal. But it just depends on the access you're trying to get, because trying to get in with like a point tool can be a little tricky. So I end up going back and forth, and I brought a variety of tools. We can try any of the tools, but I've used them all. Doesn't really dull your tools. It's, yeah, very, very forgiving. And then running through some of the equipment, and again, I'll just kind of show what I've got up here as we're covering these topics. But there's a variety of ways you can melt the material. The simplest is a ladle and a torch. Propane, MAP gas, I mean, anything works fine. There's an electric melting pot. That one is very popular. And then you can also do it in a small saucepan on a hot plate. All of those work well. There's some other complicated things that you can melt and then pour from the bottom and different things, but really nothing fancy is required.
Does it melt?
Depends on what you have in there, but I would say maybe a minute. Yeah. So it goes pretty quick, and once you start, actually the hardest part is, so this, I don't know if it'll come out, but this is now connected pretty well shape-wise to the bottom of this, and so the heat will transfer nicely. If you just put an ingot in and it's only touching on the corners, the whole thing gets hot and it's not really going to melt. So I like starting with a little bit in here, just to, now when I drop the ingot in, it's in contact with the molten metal.
How do you cut the?
We will get, or well, I had it. Yeah, I had it here. I didn't bring it. So I just cut it with a sawzall or hacksaw. The tip that I had there was the blades that I had were painted, and when I was cutting, it smeared into the material, and then when I was melting, then I had a bunch of like paint flakes that were burning. So I've started to scrape the paint off the blade first when I'm actually cutting these up.
And you know, a old bandsaw blade, it cuts like butter. So.
About a new bandsaw blade.
Right through, zip it right through it. Not the-
Yeah.
Yeah. I was collecting this. I was a little more stingy at the beginning. I was collecting all the saw filings, and I gave up on that. It's probably not worth it. So yeah, there's no real point to doing that, I don't think.
Oh, that, yeah.
It's about $26 a pound.
And that's the
Like-
film.
Probably about one of these, about $25, right?
Yeah.
Are those one pound? ingots?
Yeah, I'm trying to think if those are one or that may
What I
be.
paid for. It's not Amazon, you know.
Yeah, and that bigger one, that I think was a 2 pound. Yeah, I guess I'm not sure because they sent 4, 6, that's a pound. I bought six of those. So the bigger ingots is 2 pounds, and you used to be able to buy them. I'm sure they'll start carrying them again in a 4 pound double ingot block, but they all work fine.
About 6 ingots, that's $150 for it.
Yeah,
$25.
yeah. Ah, you gotta get that free shipping. Well, the nice thing is because you can melt it down, once I'm done with this demo, yeah, all this stuff that you see here, to melt it all back down, I'm gonna recover all the material. Correct.
Pick out what I want up here.
I said I'd send the invoice to Rick.
He is quick, isn't he?
I'll just talk to the treasurer, he'll pay one. No.
Uh, so yeah, that's kind of on the material side. Molds and forms. So the cavity, right? It's the cavity or form that creates the negative impression of the desired shape. I'll just blast through this, but we'll do each of these three or a couple different versions here. But figuring out if you're casting a blank. So anything that I would say, if I've got it here, if I'm making a little finial, that would be my little blank that I would do. And then kind of turn it into whatever I want. Rings, sort of similar thing. And those are really done as kind of a basic or one side, one piece type mold. And so this was the ring mold, and all it is I just threw that on there, went in with a scraper, created the cavity, and then I'm good. I don't have to do anything else. You could also turn a ring and then use the sand casting method and press that down. But to me, if I'm going to turn it, then I don't want to mess around with all the sand stuff. I'll just use the wood, and it works great. No, the key to that is the idea, and I've got it somewhere, is that you can't go straight walls. So if this is the ring that I'm going to make, right? And I'm going to fill this in with material. If these are vertical, it's very hard to get it out. So what you want instead is to angle those walls in to make them tapered so that you're able, when you knock it out, it'll release from that vertical wall. So my more professional background is in plastic injection molding, so that's a draft angle is what we would call it. And so it's critical that any vertical face from your pour direction has some amount of draft. So you can't undercut it because it would be locked in, and you really can't get it to release if it's vertical.
You reuse that mold before you have to throw it away.
I have not reached the point where I've thrown one away. I would say this is the closest, and I'll pass this around. And I've probably done 15 or 20 little blanks with this. And really, once it chars, the char is kind of an insulator. and it doesn't get worse and worse and worse and worse. So, yeah, sure. So that's an example really of a kind of a two-piece, the two little pieces where I wouldn't be able to get that out if I poured it in and it was a single piece. Not a chance. These I cut with a Forstner bit, and even these with a vertical wall, I was really having to hammer these to get them to pop free. So you would never get a piece out that, but it can be sacrificial, right? So I could pour the material in and turn the wood away, and that would be fine too.
You know, Lee made molds like that, but he also drilled the backside so he can pop a, yeah, to pop it out.
Sure.
So just FYI, something legal.
And that I have done, it actually works pretty good because even the two-piece one you see there, it doesn't really match up well anymore. As long as that gap's not too big, the material will flow into that gap and freeze and solidify, and then it'll fill up no problem. So it doesn't have to be watertight. So even if you just have a dowel that fits in the back that's somewhat snug, doesn't really even have to be, that would work totally fine. Yeah, yeah. And I don't know if I brought one. I've done that same thing. I have not. You can. The critical part is using high temp platinum based silicones for your molds. So regular silicone may burn. And really the issue is how thick your part is, how much heat mass you've got in molten material. I can tell you don't pour it in PVC. It will turn black and smoke and maybe light on fire. But silicone, yes. And I would say if you're doing small, if you're doing like these small little buttons, it would work great because it can absorb that heat. There's no problem. If you were doing a big giant chunk like this and your mold really isn't much bigger than that, it's too much heat. Your mold is going to heat up way too fast.
How
So
long is it?
yeah, minutes. Yeah, it's quick. You can pour water on it. That was in the demo. I don't mess with the water pouring. There's things with crystal formation and disturbing the component or the kind of the in-process piece. So I just let it air cool. I don't try to mess with speeding up the process. So in terms of those are the basic molds. The other one that you can do is a two-piece, which is kind of a two-sided mold. You can make it in a variety of ways, but if you buy this kit, the clay kit, and I've got the info on that, it's just a two-piece set of rings. And so you fill one side up, put your part in, stick the other part on top, fill it back in. When you pull it open, you can now take whatever you put inside out, and you've got your cavity. Being a wood turner, I got this ring and I'm like, this is like the chintziest, smallest thing that isn't like actually very helpful. So you can I just made bigger ones. So it's the same exact thing. And we'll make maybe a Santa hat. But I just made a variety of these rings that fit together. So that's pretty straightforward. The other thing that everyone, even up until this point, was asking about is can you pour in place? And yes, you can. This little dish, I cut a groove in the ring. In this case, you want the opposite angle, so it's locked in place. And then you can pour directly in here. It will char. So that's why this ended up being I dyed it black because it charred. The issue, and actually it wasn't this way oh, yeah. The pewter will not adhere to wood. And so even when you're saying that there's that little thing, it was starting to lift up and out. So I just pushed it back in and it seemed to work. But the metal will instantly warp the wood. It'll instantly change the moisture. And so like if I make out of bone dry maple and I pour material in, it'll start sweating out liquid. The water that you don't think is in there, that I don't believe in my heart is in the wood, and why I don't care to bake it before I stabilize, I learned, yes, it's in there. It'll start to sweat out. And so you have that issue with something like this. I poured it, it warped, it charred. I ended up trying to glue it. That obviously didn't work great. It just was too much hassle than it was worth for me, but it is an option. Uh,
Pewter to the will. What type of adhesive?
I think kind of anything will work. So what adhesive? CA glue works fine. I've used 2-part epoxy. I've used JB Weld. Everything seems to hold just fine. The one thing I would say is, unless you have freshly turned it and not really touched it and contaminated it, wipe it down with acetone so that you get all the oils and things clear off of it. But otherwise, it seems to hold with just about any glue. I haven't tried gluing it to corian. Wasn't that something that was tough?
Had an experience.
Okay.
Usually that's a pretty good adhesive.
Sure. I think, yeah, just about anything will work. The thing that's interesting is the pewter will heat up when you're turning. And so whatever glue that you use, if I, glue it apart into the wood, I just got to be cautious of the heat, because that can either cause it to expand and crack your glue joint, or soften the glue and then you'll rip the component right off of there, or the insert right off of there.
Tried putting some metals in corian and turning it, and it heats up and it fails. The weld, the glue, whatever fails at that point.
Okay. Yeah, that's been my experience. And usually you're fine and everything's cool, right? You're going along, and then you kind of get into a groove and everything's still great, and then you touch it and you realize it is very hot. And and that's when, if you keep pushing it, it'll melt the glue or fail the glue.
What size do you allow for?
For shrink, I am very generous. So a lot of these rings, I mean, this is a perfect example. So these are little tops that I made. That's the kind of semi roughed out part as cast, and that's the final product. So you can see there's a lot of material left, because you will get pitting on the surface, shrink. You'll get there is some amount of actual like material shrink. It's somewhat negligible. So I just overshoot, because there's no disadvantage, right? If I make a resin blank that's 3 times the size, that's kind of lost cost. With this, I'm able to recover the shavings and melt them back down. So I'd rather err on the side of a little bit too big. And then these you can buy, they're called casting flasks. You can buy metal ones, you can buy MDF ones. I don't see what the magic is in it. I turned a ring and it took a couple minutes, and I've been satisfied with that. And then different heights. So depending on your part orientation, this is more for a kind of flat part. This, I wanted to stand this up inside of there. So I just made a tall version. There's no, yeah, it's nice being able to customize the different mold flasks and shapes that you may need. Yeah. Yep, you bet. And we're humming along here. For these, so these kind of 2-part molds, this is really more directed at sand casting. I think the probably number one sand that you could get for this is Delft clay. It's somewhat expensive. But it's really just a really fine sand mixed with an oil binder, and so when you compress it, it'll stick together, and you'll see what that looks like. But it'll copy details, it'll copy, I mean, obviously the shape, but it's pretty easy to work with. I haven't used Petrobond, but that is another Amazon version. I think the particle size is not as consistent, but what I've learned is it doesn't matter for what I'm doing, so I would probably buy the cheaper one. And people have also been using kinetic sand. I'd be a little nervous about the heat, but that's an even lower cost alternative. Uh, and then plaster is oftentimes used for vacuum casting, so you could do a plaster type mold, but I don't see what the advantage would be if you're not vacuum casting. And then, the tip is what we just talked about. Watch out for draft. No undercuts that prevent the model or the casting from being released or removed from the mold. It really is that kind of that concept. But if I was going to sand cast this part and I had it dished out somewhere, the sand is going to fill in. And then when I pull it off, it's just going to pull the sand with it. So you need this to cleanly release. But you do it once, like even designing real components, you make that mistake once and it causes a problem and you're like, all right, well, now I know exactly what to avoid. So yeah, and then you throw away a lot of money. And, sand is reusable. Yep, over and over and over again. This is made primarily for jewelry. Silver, gold, really those materials melt at such a much higher temperature that it'll char the sand pretty significantly. And you want to maybe throw away the charred bits. But pewter being so low, I've never really had like significant char, and I just mash it up and it goes right back in the mix, and I've never had a problem. But if it really charred, if you had a real thick part and it really charred, you just throw away that part of it. It really doesn't dry out. Maybe like a year and a half. Yeah. And actually there's something called from here. So this is the leftovers that I have from the sand. So if it starts to deplete or I need more, right, I vacuum sealed it for no real reason, but it's convenient. They also make this Delft clay extra, and this has a additional amount of the binding agent. And so if this was starting not to clump together correctly, you can mix this extra in and it'll kind of refresh what you already have. I haven't needed to use it. My guess is I probably never will, but I picked it up at the same time just in case. So it'll kind of refresh what you've got. To be honest, what we used in college was basically like playground sand mixed with motor oil, and that worked fine. We were using we were casting aluminum, so it would light on fire and it was big parts and it got real crazy. But yeah, this is just like I don't know whose truck it came out of. Yeah, so the sand works great, but it is a little bit messy. Yeah.
Do you wax your forms?
No, I don't. So okay. So these actual containers, I don't, because I want the sand to stick in there, right? And what's ideal is actually that you undercut, and you'll see it on the aluminum one. You undercut it so the sand won't go anywhere. I dust if this is what I was duplicating, I don't wax it. It's worth trying. I dust it with talc. You can use cornstarch, but that'll burn. But dust it with talc, and that is the kind of the mold release. And actually, I dust, and you'll see after I do this first one, I dust the entire top surface with talc, and that prevents the two halves from sticking together.
Thinking about
removing it after you've done your top and you want to take your form out, maybe waxing would ease the release.
Sure. I think worth a try. So sand casting, wood casting, we talked mostly about. Don't use wet wood. I don't know if it would explode or if it would vaporize the moisture, but it feels to me like the frozen turkey on Thanksgiving going into the fryer and explodes. Because I mean, dry wood will still bubble steam up through and sweat it out onto whatever your surface is. And so I use dry wood. I don't mess with trying to bake it, but you can bake your molds to try to dry them out first. What I end up doing is I pour one in, I let it heat up and get rid of all the moisture, take the piece out, remelt it, and then dump it back in there. And then it's basically good to go the second go around. And then maple works good. I have poplar there. I think any wood would work. Maple to me being real fine grained, like it ends up being much smoother. And I don't mess with sanding them and doing that, but it ends up being a nice smooth surface and nice and hard and doesn't warp, it seems, quite as much. But breeze over a couple of these things. But casting defects that you can get: sink, cracks, pitting, porosity, discoloration, embedded particles. All of the parts that you see here have some kind of defect. It's sort of built into a non-optimal process, which is gravity casting. And then you just kind of work around it. So you may cut into a piece that you think is great, and there's some pits inside, and that's also cause for a temper tantrum. And then you start over again. But and then some of these pieces have cracks. But overall, I just kind of don't worry too much about it. And it's bad enough, I'll make another one. If it works okay, it works okay. Yeah, there's some things with, and we can talk about it if anyone's interested more in technical details of optimal wall thickness and spherical volume, maximum spherical volume. There's different things of how you can eliminate some of those issues, but really I make what I want and I see how it turns out. All right. Let me just see what time it is. Well, I think we can pause on the PowerPoint. I've got more slides, but yeah, I think we can melt this down and get some of these then cooling, walk through the process in real time. So I don't know if anything else helpful from my notes, but so I think the three things which are the categories that make the most sense to me are the pouring something into a wooden mold. And actually, I made a bunch of these so I can do them all kind of at once. We'll do one part that's sand, and that takes a little bit more time in the prep. And then one, call it sort of impression mold. And I don't know if we're making money or not, but we can try a quarter or a key. If I need an extra key to a lock that doesn't exist anymore. So I put it over here. So I don't do anything. Oh, we can put some in there too. I don't do anything fancy for clamping these together. So I just spring clamp them together. If you look, there's gaps. It's not going to matter. And then those are basically ready to go. Rings, same thing. We can do one of those.
Turn it and then cut it in half.
So I'm trying to think if I think I might have okay. So sorry. Yeah. So the picture on the left, I actually took for these 2 pieces, made them nice and flat and square shaped, but still had them separated, clamped those in the chuck, and then drilled a hole on center. So then what came out, then I could just, this is what was held in the chuck, right? Drill it out, and then I've got the 2 halves. Don't look at how maybe I should have cropped it out. The jaws are at the smallest they could possibly be. So I'd recommend if you're doing that, tape around it and have a better grip. That was a little dicey. But I wasn't going real big on the drilling, and if they flew off, they would fly off. That's fine. You can do the paper joint, sure. Yep. I've done that for those weird, I don't even know what to call them, but where you take it apart and then flip it 90 degrees and stick them back together. But paper joint would be a safer alternative. Right, drill it on a drill press would be fine. If you drill it first and then cut it, you're just not going to get a circle, but that would be fine too. I mean, there's, yeah, or just drill a bunch of holes. It's like this. Take a piece, drill a bunch of holes, pour everything all at once, and then just cut them apart and carve or pull the pieces out from there. Depends on if you want to reuse it or sacrifice it. But no big deal. So this is what I was doing for these, just to make little medallions for trying different textures. And that ended up working great because actually the Forstner bit left a dimple on the back, so it would locate on the center of, I just double-sided taped and put a little divot so I could pop these on and off and do different textures just to experiment.
And you did the textures with like a picture?
Yeah, I did all kinds of stuff. I tried, this is a Dremel burr, just free spinning, not powered. Kind of like the Elf, or what's the Elf tool? Yeah, that's the Amazon knockoff Fordham handpiece for $15 version. But I don't know. I'm not like a huge fan of texture, and so I didn't want to commit fully to something nice, and that worked okay. Man, maybe I'll get into it. I think this ended up turning out good. It's pretty significant texture. And that I used a chainsaw wheel and a drill from a video that I saw, and it worked just like the video, and it was a little more straightforward than I was thinking. But I mean, you got the lathe spin, you got your drill going, and a chainsaw thing, and it worked out fine. But I'm not sure if I got lucky or if that was so. So yeah, we can do a couple of these. We'll do a ring, and so for the sand, what I've seen in other demos too, and this is the more impression one, is you can just fill this aluminum piece up with sand and then just push something into it. Pour on top, very straightforward. Ring, you can do the same thing. That's kind of the simplest way to do it. You can put it in a Tupperware and use a rolling pin, and really just making a flat surface that you can cause an impression in. I end up doing more of this where I sprinkle it in and compact it. So this is, it's a kind of funny story on this. So I bought these snowman ornament kits from Craft Supply, and they're great. I like using them, and then thought, well, I can replicate that if I wanted to out of pewter. And then it's not a plated component. I'd be scared maybe this gets scuffed and the plating comes off or something. Who knows? But your options color-wise are silver if you're going to do pewter. And so that was really the start of trying to do the hat, and this is really the final product that we're looking for. So you can pass that around if you want. And this is actually as it comes out of the mold.
Grab that. Cause it looks like your mold has like a little tenon on it. Is that what I'm seeing?
Yeah,
Grab it?
the way that I grab onto that is actually to grab onto the hat first in little 1-inch jaws, and then create a dowel on the other side, essentially a cylinder, and clean up that face, and then jam chuck that. And that's everything. When I've got the slides on the turning, everything is like an exercise in creative jam chucking. And it's really, though, like, jam chucking is unbelievable for how well it holds, for how it can get you out of these like tricky situations. One set of jaws and I can hold all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's pretty incredible. And then worst case scenario, it's a little loose and I just glue it in. That's fine.
Yeah.
All right. So the sand casting, what you want to do is chop up your sand to be nice and fine so that it's not clumpy, so it'll fill into the details if you have details. And then you just work on one half at a time. And so the beginning part is pretty straightforward, right? I'm just going to fill this in to give me a place to put the model. The thing that you want to be careful about is you can really compact this, and then I'll never be able to press this in from the other side. So there's a little bit of a kind of a fudge factor of like how hard you push versus whether or not you're actually going to be able to press this in. An arbor press would be great. An arbor press to push your parts in would be phenomenal. I don't have an arbor press, and I also am scared of damaging a wooden model with like just a ton of force. So I compensate for that just by not packing this form super, super tight at the beginning. Right? So that's basically step one. You can use a ruler. I got one of these pasta cutters. And so that now is the flat surface ready for really what we're going to do of putting the kind of object in. So the talc comes in here, or I am curious to try the waxing. See if that has a better release. But I just paint this then on the surface. It doesn't have to be really anything crazy. And then you don't have to flip over to this. I just want to double check that I do it the same. Great. And just get it lined up and press it in. And then do I have my this will work. This will work. It ends up working to just kind of I just pushed it halfway. But what was the question? I laid it horizontally. Right. Yeah, so if you did it vertical, those would now be undercuts. Yeah. So yeah, just halfway. The other thing is in the space, if the material starts to fill in, there's air inside of there and it can get trapped. And so the idea is on some of the corners, and you can experiment with this, is to add vents. So it's just a little overflow spot. So that material can push the air out of the way. And so I just drop them in. These are just toothpicks. Yeah, just cut up toothpicks. And then I just have a dowel, and that's going to be where the spout is going to be. So I didn't pack this probably tight enough, but this will work fine. So that's really the, and I've got a picture of this too, but that's really the setup for making this part. So I go back and I dust again with the talc, or like I said, you can use cornstarch, but it theoretically can burn. I don't know if that's really a problem or not, but. All right. And then it's repeat the process. So I drop the top on, make sure that's aligned. Put this in, and this I need to tack down because it's gonna fall out. So what I do is over the top of that, just make a little bridge. And the same thing, I just sprinkle this in. And now I didn't pack the bottom quite tight enough. So when I was pushing it in, it kind of rolled the edges in. So we'll see, we may have some issues, but on this other side, I'm a little more aggressive with trying to get it packed in, and I just use a little mallet. So I just start trying to get it a little more compressed. In real sand casting, maybe not at an industrial level, but they've got a pneumatic hammer and you just are like thumping across this thing. It's awesome. But uh, me in my basement, I am not going to be running a pneumatic hammer. So now the model should be fully embedded, and here's the moment of catastrophe when I try to pull it apart. But there we go. So that's one impression on this side, and then the model's over here. Actually, wiggle it. And I lost a little bit, but that's fine. So that's the other half. Easy enough. Sometimes you want to modify. You're able to modify. Like I want to draw in a little circle or something, whatever it is, right? Or make vents or make a different. The top part where it feeds in is called the sprue. And you can do that. I have a little set of carving tools, cheap carving tools that I use, and then I can just clean up if I want to make like, yeah, a better funnel or something happen. You're able to modify this sand kind of however you want.
It doesn't cause it to crumple where you.
No. So this, I mean, it's going to be hard to see, but even on this, there's a spot that some material filled in. It's actually in the top part. So just looking at that, I'm like, oh, that's not supposed to be there. So I'm just going to go in and just clean it up. Same thing. So when I pull,
Together, you pounded the top.
Mhm.
Could you have turned it over and pounded the bottom to make it better?
yeah,
Said the bottom was.
yeah, that would be a good idea. Yeah, and so when I was doing these, I was having that same issue. So I would end up doing it vertical, pack it kind of loose, fill it in from the top, pack, and then start going from both sides to get it really, because I had a big flat basically of where that parting line between the two mold halves could be. So I didn't care if it shifted up or down a little bit, and then I would really compact it. And actually, when we'll do the coin, if you're just going to push it in there and you're not messing with all of this, then I would just pack it tight, as tight as I can get it. So then this goes back together. Make sure to realign it.
You need to redust your talc where you did that modification.
No, because now the only thing the talc does is prevents the sand sticking together. to itself so I can still separate it. Now it would actually be great if the sand like glued itself together uh, because now we're just going to be filling it with the metal. And then this is my let's see, it's out of the way. And this is called a side pour flask. So the convenience is going through the side, but then I got to figure out a way to hold it. This one, I would actually, if I did the same thing, I would have sand on top and sand on bottom. There's nothing on the side. So I need to go in with a little drill bit and create, or carving, and create an actual funnel for the material to pour through. So there's an extra step with this. So I like the side pour better. I may just drill a hole in this one. Um, but the vertical one has some advantages in that you have a higher the higher the metal when it's liquid, the greater the pressure. So if you can have a big stack of metal sitting up above your model, it'll push down and help fill it out in more detail. So there's advantages to a vertical pour, but the horizontal is I or the side pour is quite a bit easier. And that's ready to go. So we got that one. And then, oh, just use this. So we can do, I don't know if the key and the coin, the key won't fit, so we'll just do the coin. So your options here are pack it first and then try to push it in, or just locate it over the top. And I'm just going to really hammer this down on top of the coin. And we'll see what we get. I put the coin, yeah, just in the bottom. It's nice because the coin is flat. So it makes this actually possible. If it's some complicated geometry, you can't, that's not sitting flat, you wouldn't be able to do this method, but you can still press it from the top. But if you really compact it, it's hard to push stuff in there. A coin you might be able to do, maybe something decorative, but this amount of material, the sand that you have to displace is too much. So then the coin, and we'll just see if we can just pop this out. Zero detail. Trying to think, should we switch and do the key? At least that's got some. Why not?
I didn't get good detail on some of this. I passed on some, you know, figurine type stuff, you know, you can cast a lot of different objects. And you get pretty good detail most of the time.
Yeah. I've done like a little tree. Yeah. I think if you push it maybe from the top, you could get better detail. Like really pack it and then like arbor press it down in place. I'm just wondering if we've got well, got enough here. Yeah, that'll work. That'll work. Any idea? Oh.
And do you normally do that where you cast a whole bunch of stuff at one time?
Yeah, I try to. It doesn't, I mean, it doesn't really matter. Makes it convenient. Really what I do, this is the truth, is I will make whatever I'm truly wanting to make, but I don't want to undershoot the material. So I overshoot. And then I have a couple of these ready to go because I know I'm going to want more of those and they're conveniently shaped for remelting. And so I'll just dump those in and okay, great. I want to make a finial. I've got the pieces. If I don't, I'll melt them. So I end up doing more than one thing, but maybe not as intended to do a bunch of things all at once. These I poured all at the same time. So what was this? So I always have a fire extinguisher close by. But this is about as laid back as you can get.
They also make a nap gas that's in a little bit bigger. It's like for camping, so it will set on your bench better. Here. That's kind of what I use on that.
That would be
Just a little bigger base.
yeah, that'd be nice. So what I sometimes do is just grab a whoops clamp, right? And I can clamp it to the bench or put it wherever I want it, but that would be nice. I tell you what, I'm amazed that this hasn't broken. I've kicked this thing over because I set it on the ground and it's so teeter-tottery. Not when it's on. And I come blasting around the corner and I just boot this thing across the room and it's pretty incredible the abuse that it survived. My recommendation is wear safety glasses when you do this. I'm not like a crazy safety police, but uh, if there's contamination, depending on what's going on, it can spark out and shoot into your face. I'm not saying that that's ever happened to me, but it's happened. And it's in your best interest, I think, to protect your eyes for this, even though it's pretty straightforward. The funny thing to me actually when I was doing this is so I'm wearing safety glasses, I'm concerned about splashing, I'm concerned about all this stuff, and then I go upstairs not wearing safety glasses and I cook myself a meal and there's like grease shooting off and I'm thinking why is this normal? I'm just gonna grab, it's helpful to know where your things are gonna end up when you're done. What I need though is, so at the top, the contamination will float to the top. Dross is the technical term. Yeah. And so what you want is it'll oxidize and it'll come to the top. And so I just have a regular spoon, right, that I bought at Walmart, and I just continue to kind of scrape the scum off the top. So yeah, it's not too thrilling. So another helpful tip on this is, so it's already starting to melt, is making sure to heat up the side of the ladle that you're going to pour from so that it doesn't hit a cold spot when you're going to pour. So I make sure to kind of melt it, get it up to temp. You want it to be theoretically 100 degrees above the melting temperature, which I don't mess with trying to measure that. I just heat it up, get it melted, scrape it off, assume that it's about 100 degrees over and pour. If you go like 400 degrees over, which you can do, Your wooden molds will tell you that it was too hot. Try to look serious in the action shots. Well, as long as I'm not on Instagram, everything else is fine. So the consistency of this when it's melted is basically like water. So anywhere it can flow, you're not dealing with like the thickness of it like an epoxy. It is water thin and it'll splash and yeah, it'll kind of get everywhere if you overshoot, which I'll do on this actually, I guarantee it. So I'm hot, got the pour spout heated up, and then just go through and there we go. So I overshot, fine. Fill them up. There we go. Hopefully that was uneventful. Good. It's still, hold on, it's still liquid. All right, Robin, here you go. So it's nice and melted and you just pour and you pour. There we go. Yes, it will, but it takes an incredibly long time or a surprisingly long time. It's not incredible, but yeah, I mean, it's starting to get warm there. You can actually see the discoloration. It's never gone above this 3. Yeah, it's a surprise. This is another type of ladle, and I really don't use it because it's a little bit smaller, but the advantage of this, that one is I pour from the side, and so you can get some of the junk from the top, actually pour into your casting. This is a bottom pour, and so the actual spout is on the bottom. So when oh yeah. So instead of trying to like scoop it off the top and try to get all the contamination off, and I end up having to like swirl it and do different things, I can just pour direct from the bottom and it'll go in. But then I get material that like fills in. It actually didn't pan out as good as I was expecting, but it still works great. And has a side. I mean, it's got the side pour if you wanted to do that anyway. So it doesn't take too long for these to cool down. I have heard, I've not had a ton of experience with this, is that it is sensitive to vibration because like the structure of the material is crystallizing and you can disrupt those crystals and that can cause defects. So in theory, you should pour it. And then if you're on like a wooden floor, like not be walking around and creating vibration. And I'm like, I don't know that that's real, but that is a recommendation that I've heard. And then I just let those relax and cool down. That's right. That's right. I hit the upstairs with the broomstick and tell them to turn it down. You can grab one of those if you want.
I may be stupid, but I'm not that stupid.
And then they were thumping earlier. I know. Yeah. I had to go tell them I'm pewter casting, like turn it down.
Would have invited him over here to watch.
Well, you made it. This can't go on YouTube. I don't know. So with the shavings, a couple of things. I just put them in the ladle in little balls and then let them melt down into some of the liquid. The wood that I get in here and the contamination and the CA glue and all that stuff, it'll burn off. That is when I have gotten a lot of sparking as things kind of come shooting out of there. And then also it's real smoky, so that's why I'm not going to do it. But what I found is actually as soon as the stuff starts to float, it'll start to char. This happened accidentally once and it ended up being fantastic. The whole thing lit on fire. And that actually was great because it wasn't then just smoking out the top. The fire was burning all the material away, and so it was less smoky. And then once the fire kind of cleared off, all that's left is the char, and I just can scoop that right out. So I actually now intentionally try to get that top if there's a lot of wood in there to actually burn. Yeah, and these weren't too bad when I poured them, but you'll see that if these were brand new or hadn't been used in a long time, you'll start seeing moisture and smoke bubble up through the pewter as it's starting to cool. And that's really what I'm trying to avoid because my concern is that that's causing kind of like corrosion and oxidation inside of the molten material that'll then later crack or become a defect. And I found that to be reasonably true, that when it's real smoky and real, like a lot of vapor coming out of there, that the parts aren't as good or the castings aren't as good as when I've done that pre-pour, everything's hot, I go in with the second one, and then I don't get any of that bubbling. I think the bubbling disrupts that crystal structure formation too. All right.
That, what you're saying is that you're preheating your mold, not that the liquid was too hot, but the mold was too cold, that kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's ideal to actually like bake and have a hot mold that you're using. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to mess with that. And so what I have done is sometimes I'll torch the inside to begin with, but it doesn't force the water out quite like the pewter does. And so if you've got something small like this, I just pour it, wait for it to barely set up, pop it out of there, remelt it, and then the second go around, like you're in much better shape. And the maple chars fantastic. It holds its shape still. You get a nice insulating layer of the char. The poplar that I've done, too soft, too stringy. It chars, but then the char breaks away, and so I've just been sticking with maple, and that's what I have the most of, and it works fantastic.
How much of this maple that we get from Shack is good for making these molds? Or do you use any of it?
So, yeah, I mean, maybe not so much that small stuff, but I have a bunch of little. I'm trying to think of what the dimensions are. A little bigger than like a 2x4, but like these little pieces, and that I've done a lot. That is from that wood, all of these, that piece. I just pull those little square chunks out, and that works great.
Well, I just resource of good maple.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
Still dry.
yeah. It is not. I mean, it's not dry. It's not dry. It's not Bob Franklin dry. That you need like 24 hours in a smoker to get it there, right? Plus, yeah, minimum.
You don't have thicker stock. Can you glue up? Is the glue line between gluing layers?
I don't know. I have not made molds out of MDF or plywood for just that reason. I am unsure of what the glue would do or the glue fumes. So I'll probably try it at some point. But yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, here's the funny thing. I worry about the fumes of the glue. I've got this pile of shavings that has CA glue and wood and oil and junk in there, and it's just like billowing smoke. And I'm like, well, like, not that big of a deal. But heaven forbid I like pour it into the mold and the mold has a glue joint. So I don't see why there would be. I should probably. I mean, respirator would be good. I mean, the antique pewter that could have lead, I'd be much more concerned of like any vapors that could be shooting out of that. So yeah, I certainly would be more concerned about that, but also is lead free. Yeah. Now lead free, if you read the ASTM standard for pewter, like even lead free may have trace amounts of lead. No, but that's
I know for electrical
yeah.
soldering, seems like it flows better.
So for soldering, I use leaded solder. Yeah. So same thing, right? Then I'm making fumes with the I mean all that stuff, right? Like rosin core. What's that?
Temperature. But
A little bit higher than pewter. I think about 550 maybe, 600, something like that. Yeah. So actually that hot pot thing that I had showed, the electric burner, a lot of that's for melting lead to make fishing sinkers or like bullets or figurines or things, but a lot of that is actually directed at melting lead, not melting pewter. But yeah, it's a very similar temperature.
That turn a different color so that you know it's cooled, or you just have to wait and.
Yeah, it turns a different color, so it'll go from a real bright, shiny, I'm not saying liquidy surface, but at this point, yeah, you can kind of see crystals and things that'll start to form, but it's hard.
No.
And normally I do
Rick to do that.
like I do a little wave test, and I'm like, that seems okay, and then I do one of those, and I think, yeah, 164 degrees.
Now, could it be like cured on the top, but not on in the inside?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So I've opened some that have not been cured on the inside. The thing is, this is very thin. All of these are relatively thin. It'll always freeze from the outside in. And actually what you'll end up getting, like this has it sink where the middle is molten, the edges freeze, and then as it shrinks, as it continues to cool, it'll suck in the sidewalls. And so that's something that you have to be concerned with. All the tops of these actually, you can even pass one around, but there's a dimple, right? There's a dimple in the top. It's not because that's how it was at the beginning. That's because it was liquid still on the inside. The top froze and then got sucked in as it cooled. Yeah. Yeah, 158. Right. So you can see, yeah, it wasn't airtight, so it created kind of spilled out into that gap. Flash, we would call it flash injection molding. There you go. So it's because it's so soft, you can just go in with little nippers and trim that up and save it and remelt it. Yep. So a lot of what's in that box too is, or yeah, flash and little bits. I mean, I saved little bits that I cut off from different stuff. It all goes in that bag. Using the virgin material is it is better. So I get better results when it's brand new. The more I melt it down, I don't know if I would say it gets worse and worse, but I've noticed that it's probably if new material is an A plus, anytime it's remelted afterwards with the contaminants is a B plus. I don't think it ever continues to drop, but
Take it in your that's there and just melt it into bars.
yeah. I don't melt it into ingots. What I'll do is I'll make pucks. So I'll melt that down into a little puck that fits inside of here, knock that out, and then those are my starting points. So I can drop one in and I know that I get good contact. And then this, usually that thing gets real hot, and so I made that little stand. But yeah, so we can pull the rest of these out of here. See how we did on the key.
That stand here,
No, that's steel. Yeah, it would melt for sure. And I think I brought this will work.
Like a base plate. You're saying, we would use an aluminum base plate, maybe that would help.
Yeah.
dissipate,
That'd be even better. Because what I was just using like a little scrap of wood, and it continued to burn and burn and burn and burn, and so it made itself like a nice divot. And then I was coming here, I'm like, I can't have that. And so then I turned a walnut stand with a burned in detail with a turned.
Base plate, though, it might get hot enough to start, melt on top of your base plate.
Oh,
Aluminum melt pretty soft. That's it. Pretty low temperature.
So it was, yeah, I think 1100 degrees.
Ladle is probably 1100. Still fit. Still fit, that work.
Rick's got a ton of base plate.
Yeah, I got all kinds. You guys are welcome.
That was just a piece of conduit, and I cut it and then turned a rim on it. Yeah, so there's the. Yeah, if you spent more time, I think maybe get a better. And we'll see how the sand. See how we did on this one. Yeah, so it comes out nice.
You said you use these for the finial?
So this, oh, those, yeah, for finial. Yeah. So there we go. That's the next piece. You can just rip those off and reuse those. And ready to make another Santa hat.
So if you want a hole to go through the top of the Santa hat to like put a ornament hanger in.
Yeah.
If you ask that for like a toothpick in or something. To make that have a hole through the middle.
In theory, you could. But no, I would just drill it. Yeah, it's hard. So that would be, it's interesting that would be a core pin. Also is the technical term, but a core pin that you would sandwich in between the two halves of the mold. So you could absolutely do it. I think it's worth trying it. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. That would be very typical of normal casting and molding. Yeah. Or what you do is you get ready for this demo, you have a beautiful Santa hat. You're like, good, and you go to drill the hole in the side and you break the drill bit off inside of it. And then you go in with a bigger drill bit, right? And that doesn't quite work. And so then you have a temper tantrum. And then that piece gets flung somewhere. And you start over and you say, I'm gonna drill it on the lathe just through the top and I'm gonna glue in a hanger. Yeah. I think
I'll find that in the basement.
so. The thing is, I wanted to be able to measure it, and so I threw it, and then had instantaneous regret, and I found it, but it sustained some damage. Yeah, yeah. So all the wooden pieces I took out before pouring. Yeah. All right. So that's really, I mean, hopefully that looked pretty straightforward from the casting side. I mean, the whole point to me was to make this like sort of boring. Be, wait a minute. Yes, correct. But I mean, I think when you think melting metal and all that stuff, it seems more intimidating than it is. It actually is, to me, a more laid back, relaxed process than even the resin casting, because I'm not under the gun. I'm not trying to get it into a pressure pot. Like, I can be a little more methodical.
Finial, very nice. Haven't done a finial, I'll have to give that a try.
Yeah. How are we on time? Oh,
Yes.
we're Perfect, blowing through this. I wanted to make sure you got at least to see this part, the turning part. You're probably better at me or better than me. Yeah, it's easy. Yeah, thank you.
Got it first.
Okay.
What do you do for a living?
I,
And that's fine.
What do you think?
oh yeah, you taking guesses?
Sales guy? No.
You said you were an engineer.
I am. So my background was mechanical engineering, and then I work on surgical implants for orthopedic surgeries, but not total joints. So I work in ACL reconstruction, rotator cuff repair, foot and ankle, really like preserving the original joint before a replacement would be required. Deal a lot with athletes, so it's all sports medicine. Yeah.
I'd rather.
So actually, I went into mechanical thinking I'd get to do all kinds of stuff with my hands, and then I sit at a computer, like reading procedures most of the
See
day.
education coming into the process, and you can see the engineering aspect with the PowerPoint presentation that you had, so.
I can't get away from that. Yes, the personality is engineer. The profession is
I'm aware of that.
adjacent. Yeah. Any other questions on the molding? But yeah, what I was trying to get across is it's pretty laid back. At a minimum, the ladle is $10, the pewter's $25, and the wood you already have, and maybe torch you have or don't have, but like that's basically it. There's not much more that you would need. When you start getting into the sand stuff and a little more expense, a little more hassle, a little more mess. Just depends on what you're trying to mold. Are you trying to duplicate something versus are you trying to just make blanks?
Like your black box there, what's the process of adding the ring and making sure, I guess you sand the ring and the wood together or something?
Yeah, so in the case of a lot of these, it would be taking a ring. Got one here. I mean, really, I would think of it like adding a separate wood ring. So all I did for the bottom of that box, right? So it comes up is I just made that shape on the inside and then just cut the ring so that it would fit like this, oversized. And then, yeah, cut the wood first and then I cut the ring to fit. Then I glue that in place and then I just turn all of that away when it's attached to the box. And I then make the thickness that I want and then flush it to the inside. So I really just get it to like fit and then turn it on the project itself. Yeah, the ring I just prep on the jam chuck. And then in that one at CA. For that one specifically.
Cast right in your box that you're making. You can create a groove right in the box and have it instead of an inset like the top. You have the other one.
Yeah.
Trapped in the stuff inside of it, exactly. You cast it right in your piece. So we char the top and you're gonna have to cut the char off. But that's what Vince taught us to do. We did that up in the demo.
You do it on handler, so you get that by shoulder.
Yeah.
The bad thing I think about doing it that way is you really dry out the wood, really likes to move. Especially when you're sanding and cutting it. I mean, there's a lot of heat generated then in your second part of the process. So I think you get more movement, like in the black box. Like the top of it, the black bowl.
The black bowl. Yeah, this moved instantly. And then I ended up having to try to glue. I don't know actually if I did glue this in place. But other ones I've done, then I'm like running a ring of glue around and I'm doing all this stuff. I'm like, if I'm messing with all that, like I'll just get it where I want. Because let's say that one has a defect. Well, like I'm kind of out of luck. I have to like figure out a way to turn it out of there. So I like doing the rings separate to know more or less what I'm working with quality wise, even though I could reveal some kind of void as I cut this away and then I'm in the same position. But all right. Well, that's the molding part. We can get into the turning, and this I think can go pretty quick. I've got a couple slides.
I'm thinking he could be a sales guy.
Only for you. I know you're trying to sell me on being sales.
Hey, Rick, you're.
That's where the money is,
If
man.
you had a pothole, that you found, can you kind of like solder in, melt some, not solder, but melt stuff in there to patch it up?
I haven't tried. I think in theory, yes, it would be possible. Maybe I'll give it a go. I would use a soldering iron and I would just use a little bit of the pewter and try to like melt like a little thing. But I don't know. I'm not sure if it would really do what you want.
Bet you can use a small butane torch too.
Little butane torch, yeah.
Like your use of the word frozen. When you're talking about metal and you say it's frozen and it's 400 degrees Fahrenheit.
True. That's
Not pick on my wife, but she thinks frozen is 32 degrees Fahrenheit.
I can't break the habit. That's what we always are saying. Oh, when the part freezes, I'm like, that's coming off at 400 degrees. Like but you just get sucked into your jargon. So for turning, so covered that. Jam chucks to me seem to reign supreme. I make like 1,000 of them to try to do all this stuff. So that's probably the thing in wood turning I've gotten the best at. And then though you can glue it in place, glue the parts in place in a jam chuck if it's a loose fit and just turn that away or clean it up later. I started out trying to use a drill chuck, a 3-jaw chuck to clamp parts like this. They hold incredibly well, but this material, oh, this is perfect. This is the one that has the damage. The Pewter will just cave in. It's not even worth it trying to use a 3-jaw chuck to grab something, at least that's a 1/4 of an inch, maybe a 1/2 inch. It'll leave divots, and if you're fine with that, that's great. But 1/4 inch, like it's basically worthless. So I end up grabbing this with a regular wood turning chuck with the small jaws, pin jaws, small jaws, anything. I think Rick will loan you one of his 50 little box making chucks. So you can do. It'll hold detail great. Once it's solidified, the texturing, you can look at the little texture pieces. Yeah, after it's solid, it'll hold detail very nicely. But it's susceptible to scratching and damage, certainly.
Use a collet chuck to hold the piece.
Sure. That would be ideal. I agree. That would be ideal. Oh man, now I'm gonna have to invest in something. I thought you guys were gonna be buying all the stuff after this demo, and I wouldn't have to. So this is an example of that finial. So I just grabbed it with the little jaws, and we'll do this. Cleaned up. So that second picture, just cleaned it up a little bit and call it a 10N. It really isn't, but a little spigot on the end there. Yep. And then hammered that into a jam chuck, and then turned it around and then turn the finial. So that's what we'll turn a couple of these things. The lesson I've learned is pay special attention to the transition from the metal to the jam chuck, because I end up like cleaning it up and everything's great, and I pop it off and I have a tiny little rim, and then I'm like trying to cut it off, but then the surface finish doesn't match. So my last step now on any of this is to cut the wood down and make sure that I've got a perfect transition right where those two meet, so I don't have that little lip. And then for tools, any tool works fine. It's not the case in turning steel by hand, which is not pleasant. But even brass, I mean, there's things that I wouldn't maybe use all my tools on. Pewter works great. Bevel rubbing cuts are fine if you lubricate it. Scraping cuts. And what I've found too is, we talk a lot, and this is probably good for this session and not like an overall session, is I use a lot of positive rake scraping. And so I'm not actually trying to maintain bevel contact, but I'm not coming in at a negative rake type angle. I end up letting it be a little bit positive, and it'll curl the material up and out. But you're not dealing with grain. I'm not dealing with big pieces. And so even with, like, if I have a regular carbide scraper, not negative rake, coming in and actually letting the handle drop a little bit to get a slight positive rake can help. But this gives instant feedback. It'll be chattering, and then you'll shift a little bit, and then you're getting nice smooth cuts. It's kind of like resin, I think. Instant feedback. And then I'll have to do the thing where I'll pull off the shavings and say, look at how nice these are. But the shavings will be different. So you'll get actual ribbons that come off. That's with a nice cut. Sometimes if you've got a burr, you'll get this wool almost that comes off, this fuzzy wool. And then if it starts chattering, you'll just get these tiny little slivers, and it'll just pile up. So I'll try to do all those, and we'll take a look. And then, yeah, if you use a bevel rubbing cut, the material will get hot and it will smear. The pewter will. So using oil is helpful. Same with sanding. It'll stick to your tools. Yeah. It'll stick to itself. So sometimes, right, you're sanding and all of a sudden the sanding dust like welds itself back into position. So, and then what I did too is, this is and I can pass this around. This is a metal working lathe tool that should go in a normal tool post. And then I just put it in a handle, but it uses a carbide insert for machining. And this actually has a built-in positive rake. So it's not ideal. What I would recommend is this is the first handle I made for it, which was the first wood turning handle I ever made. And I was like, well, I'm going to be working on just like a ferrule. Like I don't want to trick myself into taking like a big cut. So I'll make a little handle. And this thing is terrible. So I made a bigger handle, which is, of course, makes sense now. It didn't at the time. But this works great. This works great as a carbide. The inserts are cheap. And there's a variety of insert shapes, a variety of things from the metalworking space. So I use the carbide inserts that are made for aluminum and soft materials. Oh yeah, I put it up here. Yeah. So all in, if you make the handle, it's $46, and you've got a steel cutting insert and an aluminum cutting insert. Aluminum, pewter, copper, brass. And then, yeah, scraping. So yeah, scraping works great. Negative rake with a burr works okay. Carbide negative rake is okay. It doesn't work great. We can try it. And then I just judge by the cut. Positive rake scraping works great. And then I sometimes use, I never thought of this. I'm sure everyone here is like, yeah, of course, like this is normal, but I had a hard time because I didn't have a lot of small round nose scrapers. So I just flip my spindle gouge upside down and scrape with the underside of the spindle gouge. So I'm not saying it's going to like be great for the edge of your tool, but to get me out of a jam, I can just flip that over, tip the tool down, come at it at more of a straight angle, and then I just use my spindle gouge as a scraper upside down. So just think. What's that?
Like make a square hole.
Chisel. I drilled it out and then chiseled it. So that's turning. We'll do some turning. I only have a couple more slides. So polishing, dry sanding works fine. Watch out for heat. Wet sanding is ideal, and I use 3-in-1 oil. I used all kinds of stuff. It smears, it dries, whatever. The 3-in-1 oil is perfect, and we'll give that a shot. And you should have a nice, pretty chatter-free surface off the tool. And then pick your sanding routine. It doesn't really matter. But I go 4, 6, 8. Whoops, should be 1,000, 1,500. You can go higher. I wouldn't use my, I'm sure it would work, but I wouldn't use my micro mesh for fear of contamination. It'll turn, if you incorporate it into a wooden project, this was cherry, and I just sanded that, and it'll contaminate that entire surface. So you got to be careful when you're sanding. So I wouldn't mess with that from micro mesh, just disposable sandpaper is what I'd use. And then buffing. Buffing works. Don't use your wood buffs. Same reason. They turn black. So I use metal buffs. And then I put a couple of recommended compounds. The thing that is the most magical is there's a couple versions, kind of like Brasso, but Simichrome polish. Your project looks fine, and then you want it to like shine up. You just like a little bit of this, and it's like it's incredible. It's sanding on easy mode, but it's equivalent to like a triple E for wood, but the polish works fantastic on pewter. And then yeah, other treatments. So I have texture plates. You can look at those different things. And then there's chemicals that you can get. Pewter black turns it to kind of a gunmetal color. I painted and then scraped to reveal texture. That's one of those. And then I have a variety of things. The chainsaw disc works great. Chatter tool, the elf style tool, hammering, brushing, carving, any of those things will all work well. And then I just said, yeah, my knockoff Fordham handle holding Dremel burrs works pretty good. Because a Fordham handpiece is like $85, and that was, well, I can tell you, it was $17.99. Yeah, and then I guess we can cover this. This is the end of the slideshow. Turning other metals and materials. I've turned a bunch of stuff. I brought some bone parts that I made. Other metals work fine. Steel's a little dicey because it is so hard. And use a cutting fluid, Corian resin, Delrin, HDP, PVC. These are all things that I've turned. And so the pewter kind of opened up trying some of these other materials and vice versa. Like you can basically kind of turn anything that you can machine. How precise and how controlled it is, TBD. For scraping? Or for, oh yeah, high-speed steel works fantastic. So my favorite tool for a lot of this stuff is no, not that one. No, I just it is heavy duty. That was one I made. Because I was at the very beginning, I got my first lathe and I had like 5 tools, and I'm like, I want to be able to move them around, and like, because I'm gonna store them away before I got into this, and then I also had it so I could hang them up and I could like pull them out one by one. Now I have like 4 different stands with tools, but this is like one of my favorite tools, so I'll pass that. But that's just a high-speed steel, kind of flat scraper, not quite an inside tool, with a slight nose bevel, so it does a lot of stuff. And I don't know what steel, I bought the steel on Amazon. It's like better than any other scraper that I have, better than any of the Sorby scrapers I have. It's rock solid. So that's my preferred tool, especially for the pewter. But Larry, you can cut pewter with a skew, not as a scraper. You can cut it with a traditional planing cut. It's light passes, but it works great. So yeah, even skew works. So we'll throw. Oh yeah, this is a safety point. Is pewter shavings are not sharp, right? So they're not going to cut you. I mean, steel, I was used to steel shavings and they are razor sharp, and same with copper and some of the other materials. Like, I'd be very cautious about even like having them like contaminate my lathe and scrape it up. And so, but these to me are basically like resin shavings. It's fantastic that they're not sharp. As you're collecting your shavings, just watch out. It may wrap around the chuck, and then pick up a giant ball of shavings that's in your little container and fling it. Just and glitter will go everywhere. So that's something to be cautious about. But again, like it's so light and fluffy, and it there is risk, but the risk is very very minimal compared to other shavings certainly, and or other things you're doing on the lathe. Um, so yeah, I think we can maybe turn a little. So I have grab them from over here. Ah, these. These. So a finial is probably the easiest thing that you could turn. So starting off with this blank, I just grab it in my small jaws in a chuck, and we can kind of skip over that part, but that just really enables me to get a little spigot turned and then flip it around and put it into a jam chuck. These ones I glued for fear of demo gremlins. Uh, and then I just clean up then that other surface, and it gives me a nice cylinder to work with. You can use your live center in the end. I make a little divot like normal and support with the live center. We're dialed here. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, we can turn this one. It's still a little rough, but the turning is also pretty straightforward. And then I just cram this thing like wherever I can get it to fit. This is I have the same lathe, but I think it's a slightly different model. There's like more space or something on this one. Um, and then is that big? That's fine. Keep it. So we can go with something maybe people would have the equivalent of. So this start off with just a carbide. This is, I think, Rockler's pin turning set of tools. Nothing real fancy. And then turning speed. I don't do anything. I don't do anything special. Uh, whatever speed you would turn wood, I would say is sufficient. Maybe a little bit on the lower end. So I don't know, 1300 doesn't really matter. And then just go slow to get the right. This is all just that rough surface. So you can just start cleaning it up. So we'll actually use the tail center. And yeah, any tool that's just normal parting tool. Let's make a little divot. Sure. Ah, it's back. Uh, am I gonna say it? I was trying to think of all the stuff that you're obligated to say in every demo. I this is pretty predictable material, so I don't go like I end up working quite a bit further off of the tool rest than maybe is normal, but we'll see if we can just. I think great. So a little constrained, but this is where really you start getting nice ribbons, right? So that's the disadvantage of actually having the tailstock is these will stay instead of falling away, they can get tangled. I'm not saying like it's good to pull them off while it's spinning, but to each his own, I guess, in the shop. But so that's pretty nice ribbon cuts, and you can see down where I was getting that surface finish is pretty good. So I'll try to get there we go. So that is it'll be oh yeah, sorry. That's like a pile of the little splinters. And the surface finish you'll get is chattery. So you just adjust. It's right, not a big deal. So that was going straight in. Really, if I take a nice easy cut, I can start getting those ribbons again. Right, turn with kind of any part of the tool too. Yeah, so if we just do and then again, if this were steel, these would be slicing my fingers and really is not pleasant. I just don't worry about it as much. So it'll hit, but it's not causing any kind of problem. Until it gets annoying, that's probably the main determining factor. And then you just go slow and kind of feel it out. I don't know, any questions on the turning or a tool that you want me to use? I have most normal tools with me. Sure. And actually, this is a good where so I'll do that in just a second. So when I do the bevel rubbing cut, right, I just like I put a little oil on there just so it doesn't start bonding to the tool and smearing. Because you're right, it does. So coming in here, right, I can take kind of a normal cut or maybe start rounding this over a little bit. Right. You didn't see that? Probably more dangerous than it's worth, but yeah, these shavings are real weak. So they'll rip instead of pull you in. There we go. So yeah, over there, normal bevel rubbing cut. And then yeah, so I have, let's say, this round nose scraper, so it's small. That works great. I've got a much bigger round nose scraper, but like in this, I'm just flipping upside down, raising it up so I'm cutting, on center, and it'll take a great shaving. This is more of a negative rake, but uh, it works great. And the thing is, I'm probably the best at sharpening like the spindle gouge because I use it the most. So if it dulls, I don't care, right? I'm used to sharpening that. Yeah, so we can finish this. We can finish this real quick. Get the sand. Yeah, so like on this, I was taking those cuts on that box with a skew, and as long as it was close to the surface, I could run right over the top and it would take the shaving off with a skew, no problem. And even I mean I got all kinds of stuff here. Flat scraper. This is just we'll just get rid of some of that material, but right, that's a parting cut. It makes Christmas tree tinsel. So I'll save that for whoever wants that. It is expensive to, but I tell you what, the amount of shavings that you get, it might be the cheapest tinsel. But I can just go in, yeah, like pretty normal. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So I think more or less like turning a normal finial. The nice thing is, so I have this uh glued in. You want to make sure you're working towards the headstock if it's especially if it's not glued in. Well, there you go. For so it doesn't pop itself out. Yeah. There you go. So this was interesting. I have not had this. This is perfect. I have not ever had this happen. Exactly. So that bottom post broke clean off. So I've had them come loose from here because I haven't glued them in or held them in. That one just broke straight off. Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. Yeah. And then we'll do one.
What sharpening system do you?
Wolverine. Yeah. Which works for me, I guess. I got one and then I got a new grinder and I'm like, well, I could switch, but I just bought a second Wolverine. So now everything is on the same platform. I will say, I think I might get one of the Stuart Batty platforms, like a nicer, smoother. The Wolverine platforms aren't my favorite, I don't think. Yeah. Any other questions on the turning or tools? I'll clean this up a little bit and then we can do like a quick sanding. I just want you to see like the polish from where it starts to where it ends, like is pretty incredible. But yeah, any other? Easy, everything was covered everything. Good. Yeah, so these are coming off perfect.
And don't have.
This is glued in. At home, I wouldn't bother. If I was though, so on that hollow form one, I cast that in and I glued that. I left it in. I didn't take it out. I glued it in because I was going to use that chainsaw and I was nervous it would pop free. So I just cast it in place and glued it, and then I just turned away the glue afterwards. But this is, I think maybe I wonder if you can catch it, but when you hit the sweet spot, it is yeah, it's so smooth that I start at 600 and that roughens it up and then go on from there. So we can do that and I won't go through all the grits, but we'll at least get that polished because that I think is probably one of the best tricks, kind of stumbling on that by accident. And I can show you then the buffing wheel too, that works fine. And then the thing I have learned also, and everyone here probably knows it, but I buy a lot of this sandpaper that has the supposedly grippy back. If you put oil on this, it'll strip that backing off of there, and then it becomes like a mess. So I end up dry sanding with this and only dry sanding with it, and then I just have the wet dry and I just use tiny little pieces with a little bit of the 3-in-1 oil, and I'll try to throw this in here. And then just stop if you don't want to go for a high polish. You can go for a brush look. That's what I was trying to go for on that little black box, was not a real high gloss finish. And that seemed to work fine too. Just want grab some work. Oh, I had it over here.
Computer with your laser?
I have not. It is possible. So I forget what it's called. I've done laser engraving, but you spray this stuff on it and it burns that into the surface. I think that would work. Yeah, what is it? I'll have to think, but it's this coating. It ends up getting washed away, but it lets you etch on a low powered laser. I don't know if you've come across that.
Have a little. NEJ, NEJ. But it's great for little fine work, but you can't cut it. It's not tall enough to cut. What kind of piece of paper? That's a big little. It's also only $200 laser. Not 10,000. That'd go for.
Is it picking up? It's hard to see if it's shiny or not.
I mean, the brown bag would be like.
Yeah, so this is that semi-chrome polish, and it, like, your surface doesn't really even have to look that nice, and this will really shine it up and gloss it up. It's like silver polish essentially, but it's,
I haven't tried it, but I wonder if like that wire for headlights and stuff.
I've used the Triple E Ultra Shine. I mean, any of this works. It's so soft that you're not dealing with a hard material. Anything will cut it. This is just a real ultra fine. Yeah, and this I think, I could be wrong, but my guess is this also includes a basically like vinegar, like a acid that will also help eat away at the oxidation layer. So it both is a mechanical and a chemical polish. But I mean, going in a couple seconds per grit. And it's pretty glossy. Yeah, scratch free. You can mix the beeswax and the diatomaceous earth, and that's good. I wanted to make sure everyone was leaving here calibrated so no one gets burned on this. So spindle turning, I mean, if somebody wants to, after we wrap up, try, these are really glued in place, like try and see how it feels. We could maybe do that, but face turning is no different. So obviously you're not dealing with grain orientation, you're not dealing, so you just scrape the front of this just like you would the side, so it becomes the same exact thing. It's hard to take a skew facing cut. I wouldn't recommend doing that. I tried that, uh, but otherwise it's very, very laid back. And then buffing wheel. This is the only other thing that I would mention, because I was pretty excited when I did this, because I wanted to get into the buffing wheels and things, but I didn't want to get the Beal, and then for metal, I didn't want to futz around with like a buffing machine or anything. And so I think I saw a video of Alan Batty, and maybe this was common, but I hadn't seen it before, where on the spot he turned a threaded mandrel that then a sewn leather buffing wheel could thread onto. And this is what I've been using for buffing. And then this wheel is $4, and this was free. I stabilized it, but and so to get into a buffing system, I could buy 3 wheels and 3 compounds, and it was $18 or something. That Beal one is very expensive. It is much nicer, but for metal or for all the different compounds I wanted to try, this is a cheap, very easy way to do it. 6-inch wheel. Yeah, that one broke off too. Yeah, both of them broke off. So yeah, I have another theory.
A little bit of pressure, there's some resistance and it just twists, the metal gave way because of the You do like a catch.
Yeah. The other thing I did different on these is I wanted to make sure that they weren't going to come undone. So I made them real tight fit, and I left it in the lathe and then hammered the jam chuck that I had already drilled a hole in on top of it. And I don't think it went on straight. So I actually dressed it so it was ready to snap. How I would do it differently is how I would do it normally is turn it, then put the jam chuck in, form the jam chuck, and then pound the metal into that instead of pounding a big flat jam chuck over the top of that. Or drive it in with tail suck. That's even better idea. But yeah, I don't know if anybody else does the buffing like this, just the buffing wheel of the thing. So it's nice because you can also swap if you've got 3 set up, or I have the Dialux white. That's one that works for this. I bought a bunch of wheels, and there you go. You're basically good to go. You could rake it or load it up. I'm not going to polish anything up with it, but for a couple bucks, this is, I think, about the easiest way you can get into doing the buffing, and then unthread it and stick your next one on. And these 6-inch wheels, yeah, like I said, I bought, well, here's the thing. I was trying to save a bunch of money, so I was like, I'll buy the cheap wheels that I can from Rio Grande, the jewelry supply. So I bought like 35 wheels or whatever.
Get the free freight down.
You're catching on. I'm all about that free shipping. Then they all fit on there. So I've got, dude, I was buying polishing compound from England. Like, yeah.
Buffing, like, wheels has like the triple and the white diamond.
For what I have. So I have the Beal system too. Okay. It would work. It will ruin your Beal buffs.
Can't use them in or change them.
Right. So this Dialux white is very similar to the white diamond that comes in the Beal system. The Triple E is much coarser. And if that's the look that you're shooting for, whatever coarseness is fine. Dialux yellow would be equivalent to the Triple E for pewter. That's a pre-polish. That's a cutting compound versus a polishing compound. So, yeah, the Beal, it would work totally fine to do the Triple E and the white diamond on different buffs, but then you're not messing with buying the new compound. I don't know how glossy you'll get it, but it works pretty good. And that you can actually use that semichrome just by hand, rub it on, polish silver by hand, polish the pewter by hand. It works fine too. All right, I have some more information I can send out in the PowerPoint. There's a bunch of videos that or a couple of videos I found, not many articles, but it exists. Any other questions that I can answer? This, I know, was just kind of a quick overview, not a final project.
Yeah, thank you.
We go okay? Is it YouTube ready? Well, this was my only other, this can be off the recording. This is the only other joke. I tried to find them and could not find anything for this. And so in the beginning of what I wrote down, I'm like, I like it because it's also not too expensive of a process. And so, you're really not going broke doing this. It's really not anti-money. But see,
I got it.
that one's a little more of a stretch. And so it got cut from the list, but now it will live on.